And you're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
And it's on 89.3 KPCC. I'm Julia Paskin. We're closing out Mental Health Awareness Month in what is an especially challenging time following the mass shooting at the Texas elementary school last week and the Buffalo supermarket shooting, as well as the church shooting in Laguna Woods earlier this month. To be frank, a lot of us are hurting right now. So no better time than to check in with Erin Raftery Ryan, Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI, West Side, Los Angeles. Erin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I want to start with how some leaders have been making a direct link between mental illness and committing violence, such as a mass shooting. It was hard for me as a person who does have mental health challenges. And I just kind of felt myself getting diminished little by little through that messaging, through the course of that press conference, feeling smaller and smaller about owning that part of myself. And I want to ask you, am I alone in feeling like that framing makes the stigma of mental health so much worse?
Julia, you're not alone. You're not alone in feeling, having those feelings, especially surrounding the stigma and increasing that stigma. Mental illness is not the problem, and it's incorrect and harmful to link mental illness and gun violence, which is often the case following a mass shooting. Pointing to mental illness doesn't get us closer to a nation to solving the problem, and doing so leads to discrimination and stigma against those with mental illness, who are more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators. And, people across the globe live with mental illness, but only here in the United States do we have an epidemic of senseless and tragic mass shootings. When we overstate the risk between gun violence and mental illness, we run the risk of creating further barriers to treatment, increasing that stigma.
The mental health umbrella is large, but it still feels so separate from other kinds of healthcare, right? Like I've come to think about maintaining my own depression the way that maybe somebody takes care of their blood sugar. But why is it still so hard to talk about it in relative terms with, high blood pressure or any other medical challenge?
It's a great point. And I do feel like since the pandemic, because we've all experienced this collective trauma, we've all experienced feelings of isolation, uncertainty, depression, anxiety. So it's really raising the awareness of mental health. And I think we are starting to have a shift. However, it has not yet become acceptable in mainstream society that mental health is health. And so it's hard to see as well, right? So if your child all of a sudden comes home from school and they're limping, you're going to say, well, what happened? What happened to your leg? Let's go see the doctor. It is more tangible and more visible. Whereas your mental health, there's uncertainty around it. But we are starting to see more about what those warning signs are, and it's becoming more self-evident that we all have mental health, and mental health is health.
We're talking with Erin Raftery Ryan, who directs the National Alliance on Mental Illness, West Side, Los Angeles. Erin, I think in my own mind, I've kind of created these two probably false categories of mental illness. Like there's the stuff that we're predisposed to versus external stressors. We were talking about the pandemic earlier. People isolated started to describe feeling social anxiety for the first time. And I was like, welcome to my world. I'm so sorry you're here. Is mental health care only for people diagnosed?
No, because oftentimes people don't get diagnosed until about 7 to 11 years after the first symptoms or warning signs come into play into someone's life. Other illnesses or conditions, usually you receive help within 2 years. Also, when something like this, like a tragedy, a mass shooting occur, it affects the whole country's mental health. And it's normal for people to experience emotional distress during times like this. Feelings such as overwhelming anxiety, trouble sleeping, and other depression-like symptoms are really common responses to these incidents. So if you're feeling this way, you're not alone.
I remember being somewhat in crisis a few years back with no health insurance, not a lot of money at the time. And finding a therapist, just finding help in general felt kind of insurmountable. What guidance do you have for people who recognize that they do need help, but they don't know either where to start or they just can't pay out of pocket?
Right. Well, it's that barrier to care is all too familiar for too many people. NAMI is a great resource to start because we offer free educational programs and free support group services. So that's a great place to start as far as really finding community and letting yourself know or your loved one know that you're not alone in this journey.
That's Erin Raftery Ryan, who directs the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Westside Los Angeles. Erin, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Julia.